For once, I found myself rather wealthy in terms of in game credits. In fact, I had so many credits that I thought to myself, I can afford two Tier 8 ships. One of them is going to have to be the San Luis in order to complete the Henri IV Bureau project, but the other one could be whatever I wanted. And at one point, I did have the Tier 8 US battleship Minnesota purchased, but I ended up selling it because I didn't think it was very good. But I decided I wanted to revisit it because the last time I played it, Azur Lane, New Jersey wasn't in the game. So I've got her at the helm now, although I have modified the build somewhat in a way that reduces the maximum AP shell damage. In fact, gyrating drill bits, as we all know, is a common battleship skill. It increases the maximum AP damage by 10%, but the trade off for that is that it also decreases the speed by 10%, something that I think a lot of people overlook, but something that is a real handicap for big, thick, dummy battleships like this, like the Minnesota or the Kansas. Both of those things can only achieve a top speed of 22.5 knots while you have gyrating drill bits active on the commander, and that is exceptionally slow, especially for this tier. It really makes these ships, I think, not that easy to play, especially the Minnesota. You really do want more speed than that. So, if instead of using gyrating drill bits, you use the other skill that simply buffs turret traverse, you can get a top speed of 25 knots, which is still really slow, but less of an issue in terms of getting around on the map. So that's what I've done here. And I wanted to show you this video because it's both a triumph and a tragedy at the same time. The tragedy, of course, is that the blue team is going to die and we're going to lose horrifically. But the triumph, well, take a look at this A.L. Montpellier behind the island. He thinks he's safe over there. He's posted up behind the island. He's lobbing HE over it, but he's spotted. So he's dead for a dev strike. 3 citadels. And that is the dream right there. That's the reason people play battleships. You want to see those nice dev strikes on cruisers. Was that not the Montpellier? That was the other cruiser. The Montpellier's still alive, but he's going to get some more damage. We've just got to wait for this reload to complete. I think the reload is 35 seconds, which is quite long for a battleship, but it's sort of worth it. Take a look at this next salvo against the Montpellier, who is not broadside to us and nevertheless takes a citadel. He actually takes 22,000 damage, and right away, within the first 3 minutes, we've done about 80k. That's quite a bit of damage to get, and some really nice salvos out of this main. It almost reminds me of the legendary ship on World of Warships PC. In fact, the successor to the Minnesota, which I think I just called the main, apologies for that, but the successor to the Minnesota on the alternate line of US battleships on World of Warships PC, the Vermont, which is the most accurate battleship I've played across both games. The Minnesota, on the other hand, on that game, is not quite so good. I think it's actually better in World of Warships Legends. The accuracy seems to be better. It seems to be able to hit more things, and it has echoes of the Vermont from PC. It really does. I'm comfortable with labeling it the mini brick for our purposes here, and hopefully the Vermont will come into play at some point, because while these guns are nice and accurate, there's another citadel, by the way, against another cruiser, and that one was half blind in the smoke screen. While these guns are pretty accurate, they are only 406 millimeter or 16-inch guns. The Vermont has 457 millimeter guns, same size as the Georgia, but it's got 12 of them. And 457, of course, can overmatch 30 millimeters of armor plating, while the Minnesota's 16-inch guns can only overmatch 27. Now that's fine when you're fighting things like Tier 7 cruisers and even some Tier 8 cruisers. But there are a few ships in this game that do have 30 millimeter plating in certain places. Think the Yoshino, for example. It has 30 millimeter side armor. or the Henri IV, which also has 30 millimeter side armor. And I think the more tech tree cruisers we get from World of Warships PC, the more 30 millimeter armor plating we're going to see. Actually, the Des Moines has 30 millimeter plating on the deck, which is what makes it partially so tanky and difficult to damage at range. But of course, those 457s on the Vermont overmatch everything. And I really hope it's coming to the game soon because I think it'll be a nice ship to play, especially for those who get frustrated by inaccurate salvos from the most inaccurate class of ships in the game. The Vermont might make you feel a little bit better, but we don't have that ship right now. So, in the meantime, I think the Minnesota is a good substitute. And people are going to tell you, because I've heard this before, people are going to tell you this ship is not very good. But it is. It's bad in many senses, of course. The hull is not ideal. You don't really want a hull that is dummy thick like this. The superstructure is gigantic. It's really easy to farm for damage. The flat surfaces all around this ship are good for arming shells. There's also some shell catching surfaces along the middle part of the ship that will be, perfectly designed to catch and arm shells. Although the armor on the sides and the deck, I'm not exactly sure what the value is. I want to say 38 millimeters. It's thicker than 32, which means it's somewhat resilient to a little bit of the HE spam you're going to be facing, and it can't be overmatched by the likes of Musashi, so you can theoretically angle. And if you do angle this ship, you can mitigate quite a bit of AP damage, but because it's so big and so thick, it does tend to take a lot of damage. So I think it's best played as more of a mid-range kind of sniper, where you want to sail around the map and try to find those broadsides, as we've talked about many times before. But the other downside, of course, is that this ship is very slow and the reload is really long. So, I mean, we're halfway through this game right now, right? We've got 133,000 damage done because of these lovely salvos, and we've even got the high caliber medal, a Dev Strike, and the First Blood medal. But 5 of our friendly ships have perished, and only the 2 cruisers we sunk are sunk on the Reds. That's it. So things aren't looking good. And the Reds have taken both the Alpha and Bravo caps, and they are now coming this way. Which means we're about to be surrounded, and there's really nothing we can do about it. We're just not fast enough to try and reposition, so the most we can do is try to use our lovely guns to finish off this anchorage, and maybe if we're lucky and we push in a little bit more, the main will still be giving broadside and we'll be able to hit him. We nearly take out the anchorage, not quite enough. We're going to have to expend another salvo his way, and we'll try to go for the main. But our last remaining battleship teammate goes down. The cruiser and the destroyer are both north of the Charlie Cap. I really wish they hadn't gone that way, particularly the destroyer. Probably would have been better if that guy had played the objectives rather than chasing a kiting battleship and cruiser. But I don't know, who am I to give tactical advice to the experts that play this game? In any case, we fire one gun at the anchorage. It doesn't do anything, so we have to fire another one. That salvo is enough to take him out, and, well, we're not going to get a follow-up shot at the main. Even if we could, he is angling now. So we've got this Iowa in front of us, and for some reason there's a Vittorio Veneto all the way out there, well past our spawn. Not exactly sure what he's doing, but I also suspect that we're getting spotted here by destroyers, so we're essentially surrounded on all sides now in a terrible crossfire with cross torpedoes, potentially. Yeah, there's a destroyer there to our broadside now, so we're toast. And you'll see just how quickly this ship can get melted down once it gets focused from a number of different angles. We really started this engagement at sort of full health, but there's really nothing we can do here. We can try to angle against the Iowa, but that leaves us open to the Veneto. Can try to angle against the Veneto, but that leaves us open to the Iowa. And then there's all these torpedoes coming in. So we take, what is that, 2 IJN torpedoes from the Kagero. Of course, that's a lot of damage there, so we're reduced to nearly nothing. Iowa is nearly sunk in front of us, and it would be nice if we could finish him off as a bit of a consolation prize. But he's bow tanking us, so the AP is not going to be effective enough to remove all of those hit points. Might as well shoot at the Summers with the rear two guns, and we do get a respectable amount of damage on him. But of course, it really makes no difference at this point. We are going to sink, and this game is going to end in, well, a tragic loss. But I wanted to show it to you anyway, just because of these shots against the cruisers. I played a number of games in the Minnesota after this, and I got similar results. But I did notice a downside too, which is that the penetration seems to fall off at range when it comes to hitting battleships. These guns don't really seem to penetrate citadels as much as you would like at maximum range, even versus broadside battleships. But that lack of penetration seems to help them against cruisers because they don't really get overpens. And so this ship is really good at deleting them, which is one of the things you really want in a battleship. So I think these guns are honestly quite excellent. We almost get 2,000 base XP on this loss because of how efficient they are at removing hit points. So, for those of you who think the Minnesota sucks, I recommend giving it another shot. The guns are really nice, and sometimes that's all you need to have a ship that's fun to play. You can kind of play around the other weaknesses like the lack of speed and the big hulking target that it is. Unless, of course, your teammates die. Then things will end in tragedy. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.